way that sort of thing was going to be feasible, and how he was feeling about WWE. But yeah, there were chants during this for it. But the fans are kind of lapping this up, and you've got to remember this is the last match of the night, and like I said, we've gone through a lot of emotions through this night, but they're still very much engaged into what they're going to see, and this is it that's really going to make that moment is the sharpshooter. Couldn't really give more of a tease than that, could you? As we see Hogan laying on the bottom in a pool of his blood, he is absolutely covered in it. It doesn't look very easy to put that on him, does it, John? Sharpshooter. It looks like it's more painful for Shawn to hold it than Hogan, I tell you. I'm not sure how good his legs were at this point, that's for sure.
No, it looks like the fans are definitely into it and definitely into the action here.
Yeah. Yeah, and there we see he's going to lean back a little bit more into it.
Or maybe because of Hogan's history of back injuries and back surgeries, maybe Shawn was a bit hesitant to really clamp it on. But
yeah, probably a wise move, I think, ultimately. But they're doing a good job here. This is, it's interesting because we've kind of seen, like, we didn't get the quite the Hulk up, but we saw Hogan nip up and do try and do the big boot thing, and we're sort of going through that next stage. And this is why fans, I mean, you see in the background there, most of them are on their feet because they really expected it to sort of almost come about before now. So they're really keeping the fans engaged. And that's cool. That's the one you were talking about.
There we go. He got a real headbutt there. The referee is down. I bet that really hurt.
Yeah.
Oh no! But I'll tell you what. I mean, I know that we've got no fans at the arenas or anything like that. But one thing I do miss, and you can see there's the photographers around the ring, and you used to get that with really big shows for both promotions, WCW and WWE, and it kind of adds that kind of authenticity to big matches, and you just don't get that anymore.
Yeah, I wish they would have that in there. They certainly don't have independent people like they used to, which is a shame. I think there's low blow there, real heel move there. Hogan is human after all. He is a man. But yes, I would love them to bring that back, that kind of the photographers for the really sort of classy magazines that still exist. I know it's not as much of a popular thing anymore, but for me, it's a bit of a shame because I guess like now, if you're a reporter, I mean, you could just book yourself on front row and just get your smartphone out and take the shot,
Yeah.
That's the problem. Here we go now. So Shawn Michaels with a steel chair. I don't remember this at all, him using a chair. So let's see. This is a very much he's behind you moment, as I call it. That's the theatre. There we go. He's sort of helped him out a little bit there. Hasn't quite gone ahead, but still quite a violent looking thing. If they'd have got a better angle on it. Now we're going to see him go to the top. Hogan very much selling here, that's for sure.
He was the master salesman. He really was. I think people forget how good a seller Hogan was. People forget how good he was. Imagine this match
happening though, John. Imagine if Hogan had come back in, I don't know, 98, and they did this match then. What this would have been like with the politics and how Michaels was then. This would have been something else, wouldn't it?
Well, it makes you wonder if Hogan didn't go to WCW and would have stayed around WWF for a few more years. It makes you wonder, that WrestleMania match we were talking about earlier could have happened in the mid-90s.
Yeah, easily. So now we're going to see a tune up the band. And again, this never got old either. Was your favourite version the tuning of the band or the super kick out of nowhere?
I've got to go with the tuning of the band, yeah. Mm-hmm. 1, 2, and the big kick out.
Yeah, here we go.
The big Hulk up.
Now I'm going to really test if Shawn Michaels is into this when he starts doing this business. This is one of those things where, as a performer, you know everything about Hulk Hogan, and then you're suddenly in there with the guy, and now you're seeing it in front of you in your match. So you would have seen this 1,000 times with everyone else.
But this is almost a match of two halves so far, isn't it?
That's for sure.
The first half was the more comical side of the match, and this has been more of a fight the second half. And yes, he did oversell there, but this has been quite an enjoyable match so far. Quite an enjoyable match.
Big leg drop. Boom. And there it is. Hogan victorious. The crowd seem happy, to be fair. There's probably a few people in the crowd that are not, but there's a lot of Hogan shirts out there, you know.
Do you know what? If I was watching this at the time, I would have been throwing my remote at the TV, John. I would not have been happy
at
Hogan.
The drink would have been over Hogan.
Oh, I would have been an unhappy bunny. You know, looking back on it now, and you know, I've got a different kind of emotional connection towards Hulk Hogan now compared to when he was active. Because when he was active, I was not a big fan. I always thought he hogged too much of the limelight, didn't put enough people over. He would tell you that he did put loads of stars over, but I always kind of resented Hogan for that. But looking back on it, you know, 15 years later, I kind of can appreciate it for what it is. Much like our watch-alongs with Hogan Flair, I can appreciate that for what it was, although you know, I would have hated it at the time. An interesting match. I don't agree with the outcome, because I always agree that, you know, you should put the newer star or the youngest star or the more full-time star over. But as we see in the current WWE product, you know, you've got the part-timers coming and going all the time and going over the youngest star. And here we've got Shawn Michaels just coming back into the ring after the match. What's he going to do?
I completely forgot all this bit, so I have no idea. I can't remember how this all finishes. Yeah, we're going to see a long stare. This was after The Rock and Hogan done that handshake thing at 18. It became quite a big thing, didn't it, for the handshake to take place? Like a separate moment, like it never happened that many times. But people loved that whole thing of Hogan and Rock, this whole shaking of the hands after the match. I mean, it's just something that gets replayed a lot.
Pretty much the same dynamic as what's happening here, because during the Hogan Rock match, you had the Rock eventually become the heel in that match, the same as you had Michaels become the heel in this match. And the handshake is important because it kind of it makes the fans kind of almost accept Michaels as the babyface again, because he's going to be on TV again the following night as the babyface. So it just the heel for that match, and now he's transitioned back to babyface. Now that handshake is ever so important, just to kind of make that transition really back to what he was the day before.
And now we're going to get the famous Hogan poses towards the end. So there you go. He's clapping Michaels out now. Yeah, I wonder what was really said. But yeah. But better than I remember it, to be honest. I thought there was going to be a crazy amount of something just because of what I've been hearing, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. It was at the beginning, like you said, pretty nuts.
If that had continued throughout the whole of the match, then it just would have been a stupid comical match. Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go, folks. There's the match itself in its entirety. I'm sure for many of our listeners, it might be the first time you've witnessed and watched it. I'll be interested to see everybody's feedback for the first one. But obviously, there was probably more written about this after the fact, John, than before the match, which is kind of saying something, you know, considering how big it was. But you know what sort of publicity this match got wasn't always sort of about the match itself. It was very much about the politics. You said at the end there, John, that you didn't agree with Hogan going over and it should go to the younger person at the time. Now, obviously, depending on, like most things in wrestling, it all depends where you hear it from, some wrestlers change their stories about 3 or 4 times, especially Hogan at times, depending on what interview you listen to. So it's one of those things. But do you feel that that match itself, John, like, would you have, if you was booking it, you would have had Shawn go over automatically then?
Well, if it was just a one-off match, then yes, I would say, yeah, Shawn Michaels goes over all day long, because he was still active. He was still a full-time active member of the roster. So yes, I fully agree that the legend should put over the more full-time talent. And we say that even by today's standards. But I think, now, I don't know if you want to get to this now, John, but I think the original plan, or one of the original plans going into this feud, was it was going to be a 3-match series.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've heard the same thing. So over a 3-match series, you can kind of say, yeah, we'll let Hogan win the first match. And then, Michaels pick up the second one and have the rubber match, the blow-off match somewhere else down the line, save the third match for WrestleMania potentially. And that was kind of the understanding. Pretty much up until the day, or maybe the day after SummerSlam. But what's your kind of recollection of that?
I think it was very much the same. I'd read a few stories where they were going to go, because WWE really thought this match, these two personalities, was going to be huge. I mean, massive. To the fact where they thought they could put this on at a SummerSlam. I'd read a Survivor Series and then go to WrestleMania, which, that story of having Hogan go over, Michaels at Survivor Series, especially with all the Survivor Series shenanigans that you could have had in there. I mean, imagine that story of the whole Brett thing at Survivor Series would have been even bigger. And then you go to the rubber match at WrestleMania, the biggest stage between arguably two of the biggest performers on that stage, Shawn Michaels and Hogan. And to be honest with you, WrestleMania 22, it could have been a huge, huge ordeal. Of course, it never happened, but I think if it had of, wow, might have been my answer. But I would imagine here, I'd read a few places, John, that Hogan wasn't very, shall we say, playing ball with the fact that he didn't want to do that. And he was, at this stage, he, for some reason, even though he was inducted at the Hall of Fame earlier this year, that he'd just come back. I don't know if it was just because it was Shawn Michaels or what the story is, but I'm kind of guessing it isn't, and for the reason I'll speak about in a minute. But the fact that Hogan, I think, might have been a little bit still insecure for some reason. I have no idea why, John, at this stage of his career, when it was, a Hall of Fame inductee at this point, like I said, but whether he just thought, I need to be the guy that wins. I've still got my fans, and the ego set in more than maybe what Michaels had. I mean, if this was Shawn Michaels from the 90s overall, I think we might have seen a really crazy situation take place on the potential outcome. But it's a fascinating one. What makes me think that it is an ego thing, John, is that the fact that the year later, when you talk about younger guy going over, well, a year later, Hogan would beat Randy Orton. And at the time, Randy Orton was sort of, he'd had this big Legends killer business going on. It would have done him a real service to have that rub over Hogan. I know having a match with him is a big deal, but in 2006, a year after this, I kind of feel like, well, Hogan should have maybe done the honours a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm thinking, this is where my mindset is that maybe it was Hogan's ego. Do you think it was overall Hogan's ego, or do you think that they were both led to believe a different outcome, and maybe just hours or whatever before this show, or even after, it just got thrown up in the air?
I think when you look at how Hogan has politicked over time, I honestly believe that this is Hogan's insecurities and Hogan's ego, the reason why he just wanted to have a one and done instead of the 3-match series that was originally planned. If you go back, this was 2005. If you go back, 12 years earlier, exactly the same thing happened to Bret Hart, because it wasn't the plan. Hogan obviously took the title off of Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9 after Yoko.
They were supposed to get the match at SummerSlam.
They was meant to have got a match at SummerSlam, and then Hogan kind of kind of talked his way out of it, lost the title to Yokozuna at King of the Ring, and then